Okay, I found it. I've been looking for this. This is the IPS theme that I used to have. Great track, a lot of bad memes, but bad memes in a good way. Really bad, but designed to be so. I'm here to read your comments, not to go over old memes, but these are worth revisiting. Okay, so let's start with Illinois Jones. Finally get into your comments. It's been a few days, but I'm trying to do this daily. Uploaded, okay, this is Illinois Jones. He said, after resisting AI text to video, I found one called Minimax. Interesting results, generated a few with 0 errors, and the fails are easily fixable. The generated people now have unexpected nuances in their performance. Minimax, okay. I think I've seen some of those, and it's getting extremely good. It's impressive. And it's interesting to see what happens and how this evolves because people can't tell real from fake. And fakeability is one of the things that the worldview monopolists had total control over. They were the ones who could determine what was real and fake and implement fakery through mass media. I mean, propaganda is essentially a form of deep fakery in a fundamental sense. But it seems like the means and the methods of producing fakery have been so democratized that I'm expecting it to be some kind of a disaster, maybe intentional. Like they may be trying to create the perception that it's so chaotic that we need more regulation. There's too much mind junk, too many mind viruses, and the commons of cyberspace can't survive. That's probably the agenda. Uki4149 says, Dorner was the West Coast version of the Boston bombing exercise. They happened the same year, and both led to martial law-like lockdowns. So the Christopher Dorner event, 33-year-old police officer fighting against systemic racism, goes on a killing spree in the department, shoots some people, and they chase him across the country. While he's going across the country, Mark Lamont Hill says it's like Django Unchained in real life. Django Unchained, Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx was also a big proponent of BLM at the time, which is highly significant because we're talking about this idea of confronting systemic racism as one of the main narratives. And that's what Christopher Dorner was pushing up against. And I brought that up because of the movie Rebel Ridge. Rebel Ridge has to do with systemic racism and certain types of power structures within the police departments that oppress minorities. And that Rebel Ridge came out just before Tyreek Hill was pulled out of his car and brutally arrested by the police, or at least detained, and that was compared to Rebel Ridge. Another example of programming, predictive, concurrent, but a tie-in to the Christopher Dorner narrative. Rocco Calzone says, fear is a mind killer, the little death that brings total obliteration. Yeah, Frank Herbert, Dune, a lot of excellent quotes. Patricia Steer says, great find with Christopher Nolan's movie how they might be doing the ISS stage. I haven't figured out why they don't wear shoes. The tight clothes and belts make sense, though. The no shoes things must have something to do with keeping the pant cuffs stiff. And she's referring to Christopher Nolan's Inception, and behind the scenes shows you how they have the rotating stage, how they simulated zero-G with no wires. And this is something I looked into because I was debating a hardcore Gloober who insisted that the astronaut's face wasn't red and swollen with a vein on his forehead after having a completely normal pallid expression, defined cheekbones, sunken cheeks even. But at the point where he flipped, he inflated. And a lot of people in the comments on TikTok said this guy's hanging upside down. Anyway, as a result of this debate, I was trying to figure out, well, how could they have done this without wires? And I came across Christopher Nolan's set from Inception, and they used a seesaw. So these astronauts likely have something maybe around their waist. It could be some kind of a harness, but there's a counterweight, there's a seesaw. It wouldn't necessitate wires. And I think debates are important because I was getting comments from people like McToon who said, either you must show us how this flip was performed without wires, or you must concede that they're in space traveling 17,000 miles per hour in zero-G. And I'm like, that's an either or fallacy. What about another option? Maybe I don't know how the trick was performed. And logically speaking, if you're at a magic show and you cannot figure out how the magician does the trick, must you therefore default to, well, it must have been magic? No, never. You just say, I don't know how they did it. I need more information. I have to suspend judgment. But I'm not going to say, because I can't debunk it from where I'm sitting, which is how it's designed. You're supposed to be fooled at a magic show. Because I can't debunk it, I must therefore concede it's magic? No. So I don't know how they did that particular stunt. I don't know how much hairspray they use on Medusa, but I'm certain that it's a trick based on evidence. It's not my job to figure out how they did it 100%, but I am doing this individual a favor by showing him how it could be done. Fakeability is a key point here. Is it fakeable? And I was just happy that we were in a talk, a discussion, a debate where fakeability was even being discussed. Because generally, the hardcore anti-flat earthers will spend all of their time talking about the Earth's curve. They don't like to talk about the ISS. It's like an Achilles heel. Speaking of the ISS, those two astronauts are still stranded up there, and there may be some interesting developments with that story. And I use the word story advisedly. They fly up there in the Boeing Starliner, and Boeing already an epithet for disaster. There was predictive programming in Fly Me to the Moon for a Boeing disaster. So it seems like a disaster waiting to happen. And as we're looking at this, we have the Calypso capsule, and they're stranded because of it. Well, Calypso is the name of the nymph who keeps Odysseus stranded in the Odyssey. So bringing this up, we're talking about the Odyssey. After Odysseus escapes Calypso, he confronts the Cyclops and then the curse of Poseidon, because he blinds the Cyclops, and so his daddy Poseidon sends a storm. So looking at it from this perspective, I would suggest that their space odyssey has only just begun, and we're about to see the next stage of it. I don't know what kind of disaster, but it's also interesting how their capsule's already been brought back down to Earth, and they're still up there. So they're still in the abyss, stranded at sea. Just another example of these stories that they use to overlay your reality. And you're supposed to believe that these people are up there suffering, they're stranded, but they're being brave. They're going to make a movie about it in the future. But anyway, it looks like the Odyssey tie-ins might have some significance here. We brought up a few things last night pertaining to this, like the movie ISS, Russia versus America. Russia has the Poseidon, these submarines that could take out a coastal city. So we'll see where it goes. But to address Patricia Steer's point, the fact that they're not wearing shoes, now this is addressed in the behind the scenes on Inception, where the actors are pretending to be in zero G, so they have wires instead of shoelaces, so they don't dangle and give away where they're actually oriented. But their clothes, when you look at the astronauts, you have to assume that their clothes are somehow stiffened or reinforced in such a way that they don't fall over their heads. And I think I've always said this, they look kind of strange, how their clothes are so tight, their khakis are always pressed, their belts are too tight. And I'm like, why do you need such a tight belt in space? Nothing's going to tug your pants down. Well, it's because they're hiding a harness, more than likely. But that astronaut Butch, he's giving it away with the blood flow to his head. The other one, Medusa, seems so desiccated that there's no chance of it. And that might be part of it. When they hire an astronaut, it's like you couldn't fake it with somebody that had excessive levels of body fat. And the hair is problematic. And I think Tom Cruise's hair is going to be extremely problematic. And I'm curious as to how he's going to engage in space fakery when he goes onto the movie set on the movie set that's pretending not to be a movie set. And then the movie he makes on the movie set on the ISS, which is pretending not to be a movie set, he's going to produce a movie that's going to look realer than what's on the, quote, real space station. That's going to give cognitive dissonance headaches to a lot of people, and they're just not going to see it. Jim Firebrand says, this is a good episode. I think about that scripture too. Oh, here we go. This is from Blather Funnel. He says, auto believers reminds me of 2 Thessalonians, ancient predictive programming. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. On the flip side, aren't we all behind many veils of ignorance? Great content, Tim. You helped me rip some veils of ignorance off my face years ago. 2015. Yes, I happen to agree. Auto believers are delusional. They've been fed a big delusion, and the system rewards it. It incentivizes this. It's the lie world order. Now, as far as being behind veils of ignorance, the screen is just one veil that we've all stepped out of. The screened, the MSM, the mainstream mediated worldview, and recognizing it as a model that isn't the territory. Stepping out of that, that's one veil, but it's not the only one. There are known unknowns, but every false explanation that keeps you in the box is a veil. And that's what most people are surrounded by, false explanations. And you tear down one of these veils, and you're left with what? Questions. Questions that have answers that are outside of the world of acknowledged ideas. For me, I see these veils torn down, and for me, it creates curiosity. Like, I want to know. I'm seeking to know. And seekers after knowledge are different than followers who merely believe. It's a huge distinction, and truthers, ironically, are believers and followers. They're not actually seekers. And they may have started out that way. You seek the truth, and they have all kinds of ruses and alternative belief systems that are very attractive to a lot of people for various reasons, but they're able to veil them behind additional layers of ignorance and misinformation. So I don't assume we know it all, but we do have known unknowns. And the fact is, we're seeking. We haven't been rendered complacent with false explanations. Jim Brandy, Mexico says, deprogrammed truther, the fear the knowers always has a, oh, okay, I see. The fear that the knowers pump always has a certain amount of vagueness to it. That way you can fill in the rest of the information to fit your agenda. Personalize your own fear. Yeah, the vagueness is a design. They're not too specific. They keep it vague so you can draw from whatever hideous or grotesque ideas and scenarios they implanted into your mind through other forms of programming. So you watch all these movies. How many times did you see buildings crumbling, iconic buildings falling to the ground, blasted by aliens or bombed? Or, in other words, you have been flooded. Your mind has been flooded with all of the visuals you would need to imagine whatever it is they show you on TV. If you recall, season 4 of Stranger Things happened just after the Uvalde shooting. And as a result of this, they put a warning label on the first episode because it had imagery of dead kids, a bunch of kids that were slaughtered. So you watch the news, you don't see anything. You watch Netflix, you see everything they can't show you on the news, and they conflate the two deliberately by drawing your attention to it. So you're trying to turn off the news, you watch Netflix, and it says, oh, this is going to remind you of what just happened in Texas. Pray for those families. All by design. These are synchronized, of course. The predictive programming, the mass mind is targeted with a lot of programming that is designed to be tapped into later with fake news events. Do you think says, miffed is a great word. The media is unbearable. I really can't even watch the tube. It's an alternate reality show. We won't end the earth. Most likely it'll be around for a few million more years. Humanity, who knows what will happen. Okay, alternate reality show. That's a great way of putting it. Last night I was describing the mainstream mediated worldview as a fictional universe. It's internally consistent. And if you have content or ideas that are not compatible, they don't get in. It's like the Marvel universe. You're not going to have Star Wars characters mixing with it. These are two different fictional universes. There'd be too many contradictions. And right now, the agreed upon consensus reality does constitute a fictional universe to the extent that it is augmented with superstitions, hyperstitions, myths, and, big, generally accepted lies. But it also has characters that reference one another. All these school shooters, like Audrey Hale, references Littleton, the Littleton shooters. And you have Brenton Tarrant references Anders Breivik. They do this on purpose. They want all these fake characters to interact in the same place so that it creates this sense of internal consistency and it makes them all seem more real. Like, there's no way Audrey Hale was fake if the Littleton shooters were real. It makes it seem more real. It would be tragic if somebody really did do something because of what they saw in the news and thought it was real. But no, it's a fictional universe. We live in the Disney universe, Planet Netflix. But there are many overlapping fictional universes like the Batman universe. And last night we talked about that extensively. How the Batman and Joker, the Gotham, how it all has been superimposed on some major psyops really since 2012, 2013, since the Boston bombing, Aurora, the Joker shooter. And we came across some fascinating threads last night with the Joker shooter in Aurora and the connections with Kubrick, Full Metal Jacket, which has references to the JFK assassination, and the main character is Joker. They call him Joker. Well, Joker is based on JFK, who had this brief stint as a World War II photographer, connections to William Randolph Hearst. You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war. And the actor who played Joker in Full Metal Jacket, Matthew Modine, is in Stranger Things. Season 4, Episode 8, he gets shot. One of the other connections is Joker has the target on the side of his head, and based on that, I said Trump would be shot where the 45 is. And that was before they put the 47 on his head. Now, Robert Crimo, the 4th of July, 4 of 7, 4-7, the 4th of July shooter had a 47 on the side of his head and a poster of Lee Harvey Oswald. And he had a penchant for going to Trump rallies. And after that event, this was 2 years ago, I said, Lee Harvey Oswald is on the world stage and he's going to shoot Trump where Kubrick referenced. I also want to point out that Season 4, Episode 8, Stranger Things, Matthew Modine, Joker, JFK getting shot with an AK-47, that's all a Trump tie-in. Just like Season 4, Episode 8 of The Boys, Assassination Run, with the Homelander, a Trump tie-in. So even the season and the episode numbers correlate. The actors correlate. It's very integrated, synchronized. And it's not because of anything more than intelligent planning by the meta-scripters. So we know that there are meta-scripters. And what I mean by this is there are writers, and we identify many of them. There are actors. And too many truthers have focused on crisis actors and haven't really said, well, who's writing their lines? Okay, let's see. Do You Think says, agree, there's no off the grid. They all have solar panels and cell phones and put up YouTube videos of how to live off the grid. It's crazy. Yeah, if you were to dig yourself a bunker and go into the hills and lock yourself in because of fallout and liberals and immigrants and everything, and aliens, I guess, you lock yourself in, now you're safe, right? Well, no, now you're in a maximum security prison and you are your own prison warden, your own home FEMA camp. You're not off the grid because the things that you're hiding from don't exist. You've been cowed, you've been terrified. And that's what they want. They want a society of Morlocks, like H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. I think they want us all to acquiesce to the idea that for our own safety, we must enter perpetual quarantine because of mind viruses and viruses and fallout. We can't breathe. Climate change, all the rest. But I think this is going to happen gradually through a cultural shift, like fashion. They might make, if they can make radiation swag that someone like Ye would promote or some other celebrities, they can probably get us to adopt these entirely ridiculous lifestyles without having any real fuss about it. Minimal fuss. But fashion is what made 2020 possible. Fashion is a form of subtle coercion to groupthink when it's weaponized in a certain way. Paradoxy Moronic says, Michael Keaton played Batman opposite to Jack Nicholson as the Joker in 1989 and Danny DeVito as the Penguin, 92. Both DeVito and Nicholson played in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest about mental patients in a facility. Jack Nicholson also worked with Kubrick on The Shining, an iconic film about psychological unraveling. Now, the Michael Keaton connection here is interesting because we were talking about Beetlejuice, green hair, Joker archetype. Joker 2 comes out Michael Keaton was Batman, another connection. And then the shooter, second shooter, again, sequels. Second Beetlejuice, second Joker. And when the second Joker was being filmed outside the courthouse when Trump was arrested on 4/4/2023, the public driving by thought the mob was there for Trump. So they've merged these two realities, this fictional Batman universe and the real world. So having this Michael Keaton out there in a sequel, the Joker sequel, and then you had the second shooter, Ryan Routh. And Ryan Routh was described as having been laughing in the courthouse, laughing while he was arrested, like the Joker, and his hair was blue-yellow, which gives you, of course, the green. And then, of course, I mentioned how Trump's going back to Aurora, where the Christopher Nolan movie's coming out, Dark Knight Rising, and the Joker shooter makes an appearance. He has orange hair, by the way, which has some interesting connections. We were talking about season 1, episode 12, The Sopranos. Tony Soprano's holding a glass of orange juice, and they attempt to assassinate him. They shoot his orange juice, and it clips his ear. So he's got an ear bandage at the end of that season. So there's a Mafia Don connection, orange juice, in The Godfather when he's shot at Vito Corleone. He knocks over a bunch of oranges, and he dies with orange in his mouth. He's eating an orange. And then you have Trump with, the scary orange man, orange face makeup that sometimes rubs off on the face of Laura Loomer. So we're looking at some kind of connection with the Joker theme that goes way back to Full Metal Jacket and ties in to this Trump head wound scenario. Okay, let me switch to my other account, and we will go to the comments over there. Again, I appreciate all of you who leave comments. I'm going to do more of these member videos so we can get your comments and suggestions, your feedback, and additional points that we may have missed. Okay, so we're on my additional channel, Infinite Plane Radio. Okay, I think we've covered pretty much everything. Deleted User is the one who said this. Season 1, Episode 12, Tony has an attempted assassination on him and it hurts. His ear gets disfigured and he wears a bandage. Fascinating. And we have so many examples of this, and we are the only ones, I think, who have the correct explanation of what predictive programming is. And this is one of the defining characteristics of parallel media. We're not the mainstream, we're not the alternative, we're not running in opposition to them, but we're in fact a separate body for all intents and purposes, and it needs to stay that way. And one of the things that separates us is our understanding of how the predictive programming is relevant to the programming of the news media. All right, I think we've covered a lot here. We'll be live tonight to take some calls. Jim Firebrand says, this is a great episode. Have you ever read The Stoic Philosophers? I have been listening to some audiobooks on the subject, and I do think that what we're embracing here is mostly a philosophical paradigm shift. It's not ideological. It's not a belief system. We're pointing out that you need a different philosophical framework to process media and not get dragged into alt reality games, into collective delusion, into allowing the screen itself to become an authority over your mind, and with all that entails. We're talking about mind aids, the loss of critical thinking faculties, the loss of a mental immune system, the total susceptibility to programming. And the alternative, what we're offering here, is deprogramming. And not only that, but following your deprogramming, you get mind war inoculation. It doesn't trigger you anymore. It can't trigger you if you engage in routine suspension of judgment. And most people can't, because they assume it to be true unless it's proven fake, and there's so much news every day you can't possibly fact test everything. So if you're a person of faith when it comes to media, you're gonna be lost, submerged in the sea of irrelevance. Whereas here we are on top of it in our raft, which is growing actually. We're at more than 1,300 subs on the main channel. So again, I appreciate all of your comments, and we will continue this conversation live tonight.